of financial coaching, employment services, and access to income supports. And we see this integration as being key. And I'll talk more about why it is key, but we know that the workforce services or employment services alone cannot get community members to that goal, that financial bottom line. So it's really important to integrate the other two services in order to see any increases, gains in financial stability. So I note this here just to say that these are really what we're collecting and the reason why we're collecting them. So I'm going to try to illustrate that a little bit more in the next slide, the reasons we collect this and focus on this. So I'm going to do that by we're going to take a look at an example here with the Jones family. And what we'll be looking at is a annual budget. So what you'll see, what I'll be presenting is really the budget, kind of simplified budget here with looking at an annual budget rather than a monthly budget, just for this example, although we usually look at monthly. What you'll see is this at baseline, we have before working with the FOC, the Jones family had really low income, high household expenses. We could see they have really high financial charges, especially from those things like payday loans, check cashing, things like that. And what we don't see is them taking advantage of some of the tax benefits that are available to them as low income earners. Once starting to work with a employment coach, they are supported in kind of connecting to a higher paying job, which, what I didn't note in the baseline is you can see at the end of the year, they are short about $13,000. I think this is something that we see as around the average for the clients that we serve today. And so what we're looking to do is really increase both income and reduce expenses. In employment counseling, we see that that's where you'll see the income increase, but there's not much that can be done here to kind of reduce expenses. We actually see an increase in check cashing because there's an increase in earnings. So although that was able to increase their net income overall, there's still more work to be done. And that's where we have our access to benefits coming in. So through work with their income supports coach, they found subsidies that would help to reduce their housing costs, utilities, childcare, healthcare as well. And then they also were able to learn about the tax refunds that are available to them to support them through that year as a low income earner. And that actually got them to be above, finally above negative in the Black. Lastly, we have our financial services. So now that they, now with working with the financial coach, they're able to start saving some money. So saving in an interest-bearing account, which earns them some money there. And then figuring out how to reduce some of those financial expenses, whether that's moving from just check cashing to opening up a bank account where the fees are much lower, reducing some of the debt that they have when it came to those emergency loans and furniture expenses. And ultimately that brought their bottom line up to to have a net of 4,000 at the end of the year. So really all of these three working together is what allowed for that client to achieve that bottom line and increase their net income. So I think what's really unique about LISC and actually the financial opportunity centers themselves is the level of detail that we collect, or the level of information that we collect on the financial data that really helps to ensure that the things that are happening across other services are being tied back to the financials so that we can see those financial gains for clients. Here on this next slide, I just wanted to touch on what are the key financial outcomes that we gather, that we talk about, and that LISC, I think definitely at the national level, but also at the local level, report back to funders. These are the main outcomes that we pull out to report on, and that is just how many people are served, how many people were placed into jobs. We focus a lot on increasing those average starting wages, so focused on finding higher wage jobs, higher wage career pathways to increase that average starting wage for folks. Skipping down to the bottom of this, we have our financial key outcomes, which are increases in credit score, net worth, and this says cash flow, but we often call it net income. So those are between our credit reports, our balance sheet, and budgets to get a full picture of folks' financial situation. And in the middle here, what I skipped over is the integration of services. So again, the model is meant to be an integration of the three core services: employment, financial counseling, and income supports. And the reason for this, I'll actually dig into in my next slide, is that we know through research that bundling works. We did a study, I'm trying to think of what year this was now, 2015, where we took a look at clients that were receiving the integrated services of the Financial Opportunity Center model compared to those clients at agencies that were only receiving one service. And this was a study with 45,000 clients over over 3.5 years, and taking a look at what kind of those key outcomes that I pointed out and what are the differences, basically. And what you can see here is that folks that the dark blue is folks that actually had the integrated services. The lighter blue is participants just receiving one service. And what is not kind of clearly noted here is the fact that also in the darker blue, these are folks that had multiple points of contact within the FOC model. So it's not just that they had talked to the financial coach one time or the employment coach one time, but they met with them over multiple points of time throughout their period at the FOC. And that's why we do emphasize that frequency of contact with clients. But kind of back to the research is that for those that did have high frequency of contact across the three services, they had higher placement rates, job placement rates, and also retention rates in the job. Other things that we saw outside of this chart were they showed better credit building behaviors like on-time payments, credit outcomes generally, and they were more likely to reduce non-asset related debts. So before I actually continue forward to talk about the FFT performance report, I think that the main purpose of this workshop, right, is to talk about how we can use data to talk to our funders, to promote the program for grant writing purposes and funding. And so I think these are the things that we highlight, right? So I think the main things to note is that we collect a level of information that is unique to any other program and really can speak to kind of financial gains for the client across, I've already pointed out those key financial outcomes, but then how being able to connect it back to how is this integrated model stronger than just providing one service to a client. So focusing on the integration and those key financial outcomes is going to be key and really helpful. It's what we notice funders are really excited about when they hear about our program. I put this together when we weren't totally sure about the FFT performance report yet. So my intention was to kind of leave a space to ask the group in a poll, which I don't know if we have a poll, whether y'all would be interested in digging a little bit deeper into the FFT performance report, or prefer to spend more time looking at custom Salesforce reports. So I'll take some time to see. Let's see. Raise your hand if you would like to focus at this moment on the FFT performance report. Let me see if I can see where hands are raised. Okay, I see. Oh no, I see a release. Okay, maybe that was an accident. Okay, cool. So you can put those down, and then I will put account for custom Salesforce reports. Raise your hand if you're more interested in custom Salesforce reports. Okay, I think that was really clear. I will take some time. I'll try to save some time at the end to look at custom Salesforce reports, but it seems really clear that folks are mostly interested in the FFT performance report. So I'm happy to dig into that a little bit deeper. Okay, so here we have, let me start. How do we use our FFT performance report? The beauty of the performance report when it works is that it can be used for multiple purposes. It can be used to review your outcomes and track performance, make sure that you're on track to meet the goals that you set for the year. It can also be used to manage caseloads and data entry. So just making sure that you're keeping up with, let's say, those folks that are due for a credit report pull, and making sure that you're on top of doing those at the regular pace that's expected for the program. It also can help you to evaluate the program. So getting a sense of when kind of comparing two lines, you can see, you can identify if your program is kind of meeting the intention of the program. So let me do an example. So if we look at, and I'll show it as well because I'm a visual person. If we look at something like people with subsequent budgets completed in the last, for the last increase in earnings during the report period, and divide that by people who had an increase in earning, this will give us a good idea of how closely integrated employment counseling is to financial counseling. And so we want a higher percentage this will help us to evaluate whether the services are actually integrated really well with each other. And when they are integrated well, we do see greater outcomes across the board for our clients and the program itself. So I'll dig into that a little bit deeper. First, how to navigate to the performance report. Everyone who has a Salesforce account has access to the FFT performance report. So when you log into Salesforce, on the top main bar, you'll see a tab that says FFT performance report. You're able to pull the report for any time period that you would like. So you'll enter in your unique start and end date. You can also filter by any groups for reporting. So if you're familiar with the Salesforce case record, there's a spot where you can add someone to a specific group. And here is where you can kind of filter for that group to just see the FFT lines for those that fall within it. The last filter you can kind of do is filter by any section of the report. So if you're just interested in looking at the employment counseling section, for example, you can just zoom into that. And that's advised if you are just looking at one, to do that one section, because it will make the report run much faster. So how do you look at the reports? So once you click on Run Report, this is what will be what will populate the screen for you. There are 4 main components of the report. We have the report period at the very top, and this is the date range that you have specifically selected. And all the outcomes and services for the following lines will be for the services and outcomes that occurred within that range that you had selected. The next thing you'll see is so now looking at the columns, you'll see the line number. And this is often the number that we use for referencing any particular report line. So often if you have some type of question or issue that you're noticing with the report, and you reach out to our FFT performance report desk, we might ask you to please reference the line number so we know exactly which one you're talking about. The next column is the name of or description of that line. So it gives you a good sense of what should be populating, what we're kind of looking for as part of that. And then we have the report results. So there's 2 columns of report results. Both of them are clickable. So from your login as an FOC staff member, you should be able to click on any one of these numbers and it will bring you to a list of clients that fall within that list or outcome. The first column that says for last month will report outcomes just for the last month of that report period. So if you can see here, the report period is at the very top is January 2019 through December 2019. In this case, what would be reported in that for last month column would be December 1st, 2019 through the 31st. Now, if you were to pull this report only through the 15th of December, then what's going to be populating that for last month column is going to be just the 15 days of December. So December 1 through December 15th of 2019. Just something to keep in mind for that for last month column. And then the second column is for the full report period. So that full time that is noted on top, which is the full year of 2019. Okay. So here I'm going to take a vote on what we would like to see. And we'll take a look at two, maybe three, depending on what the breaker is, of these financial outcomes. As you guys are voting, so please feel free to write your vote into the chat box, which of these key financial counseling outcomes you would like to take a closer look at. And as you're doing that, I will note that this training that I'm kind of walking through in person and live today virtually is also available on our learning management system. So if you ever wanted to if you want to dig into every single one of these and kind of take your time absorbing the information, you can do so. As a Salesforce user, you have access to the learning management system at all times and can go back to it whenever you'd like. Okay, thank you, Melinda. Okay, I see F13, F15, and F2. So I will start from F2 just because it goes in order. All right, so F2 is our line for people who got at least one service. And because it's within the F lines, it's specific to financial services. So these are all of the components that fall within this line that makes, that we use to basically consider somebody as receiving a financial counseling service. So the first one would be if somebody, yes. So before I actually break down that, I just want to say that anyone that has a service is going to fall within the F2. So that includes anyone from F1 who received service for the first time, as well as folks who have been receiving financial counseling services over a longer period of time, even outside of the report period. Even before the report period, not after the end of the report period. So the services, somebody would be counted if they received that service within the report period, and that counts for any financial assessment, such as if you have a financial health, budget, credit report, balance sheet with an assessment date within the report period, a financial counseling service entry with a date of service within the report period, an outbound referral. So specifically outbound referrals that have the reasoning of financial services, and also the date, the referral date within the report period. We count the action plans as part of financial counseling. So if there is a start date or even an end date, meaning that you kind of touch base on this action plan at some point with the client during the report period, it would count towards that financial counseling service. Same thing for if there was something within the ECM goal. So ECM goal being a part of the larger action plan here. Okay, and yeah, and that's the full list. So so any one of these is mostly that there's a date within the report period to count as a service. Any questions about that? Okay. The next one I see here is F13. So I'm going to just zoom to that one. Oh, perfect. So F13 is for people due for a subsequent credit report pull. This is actually was one of my examples of a line that can help with case management. It's meant to help you see who you're needing to connect and reach out to pull credit report for. And we expect that this would happen at minimum every 6 months, although you can pull credit more frequently if it's something that is part of the client's goal, and that they have authorized you to do so. So what this line is looking for is that within the credit report record, that there is at least one credit report assessment with the column. I hope folks can kind of see it here. Within this credit bureau, so we have TransUnion, and in the record, there's multiple bureaus. So within one of these bureaus, there should be an authorization to pull credit, and specifically the every 6 months for 5 years value. And then it's gonna look at the date of the authorization was signed on, and it will continually look for the time passing, basically. So this line is going to see at the every 6 month point, has there already been an assessment that was pulled or not? Was there a new assessment created for a credit report or not, in order to tell you if you need to, if this is still pending for you. After 5 years, this count will stop, but it also will continue forever. So the only way to kind of get somebody off this list, if you're no longer working with them, would be to either withdraw that multi-pool authorization. So you'd update this field that says, authorization status. It can be updated to withdraw. And of course, a client can also withdraw at any point if they don't want it pulled every 6 months. Also, the other way to kind of have someone come off of this, people do, would be if they had an exit date on their case record. So this line is not going to be looking for clients that have exited. It just wants to focus on those that are still active in the FOC. Okay, and I'm going to do just one more. I see F15 came up a lot. So this one, F15, number of people submitting at least one subsequent financial assessment. This is really looking at the number of people who have either an intermediate or latest sequenced assessment across any of the following, which is financial health assessment, or credit report, budget, or balance sheet. What's important here, what we're kind of using this for, is to compare between the baseline. In order for us to see any financial gains for those key outcomes that I pointed out earlier, net income, net worth, and credit score increases, there needs to be first a baseline, something to compare to before any services were rendered as part of the FOC. And then there needs to be something that follows after that, so that there's an ability to see any gains or losses. And so this is really kind of tracking that for you to make sure you're kind of following up with clients on a regular basis to see those changes. While I have this here, I'll note kind of the recommendations for how frequently you should follow up with every one of these. So the financial health assessment and the credit report can often be done together. We'd say every 6 months, at minimum every 6 months, the credit report should be pulled. And then you can also kind of follow up on the financial health assessment at the same time. It is advised that you kind of provide the financial health assessment to be completed before you reveal any changes in the credit reports, or the credit score for a client, just so that the credit score doesn't influence the financial health assessment in any way. The budget and balance sheet are things that might be more frequent, especially the budget, as there's changes to income or expenses. On the balance sheet, if there's changes to savings, the asset side, and debts being reduced. But if you are not able to kind of keep up more frequent than every 6 months for the balance sheet, I would say that is also something that at minimum should be done at the same time as the credit report, because the credit report actually does provide you with a lot of information that could help to update the balance sheet as well. So things as far as like, credit card balances, debt balances, those are all reflected on the credit report, and so can be updated with the balance sheet as well. Are there any questions about the F lines? And I don't know if anyone has the ability to unmute, but I'm also happy to kind of take those over the phone if it's not in chat.
Jackie?
Yeah. Hi.
Oh, hi. This is Alan Gentle.
Hey, Alan.
Hi. Morning, everybody. I was just wondering, for those of us that are both in the United Way and LISC network, 2 questions.
Okay.
The United we have the authorization that's also required by the United Way. Will one of these be sufficient, or do we have to have both in the system? Is one question.
Yeah.
The other question is, with the United Way Salesforce, the credit report is automatically pulled and then populated in the client's file. Now, I know that historically this was not the process for LISC. With the revised functioning of the Salesforce with this, has that changed, or will we still have to physically pull the report and then populate the data points in the system, the client's records?
Yeah. So for your first question, I believe that one should be enough, but it would be good to maybe just share with your PO what the United Way one looks like, so we can get a sense of if it meets the same requirements as what we have listed on our authorization.
Okay.
I know our legal team kind of looked at it and approves what we have. So if needed, you could always maybe combine the 2 into one, so folks are not having to sign multiple sheets of paper for authorization. On your second question, that is a super cool feature that we have not explored. So it is not different in Salesforce Lightning. You would still kind of have to manually pull that report and then enter it into the system as of now. But it's great to hear that it's a feature, and we can definitely share that.
Now, typically, with clients historically kind of stick around about a year, maybe a year and a half, and then fewer, up to the 18-month, 24-month period. Now, with the goal of being able to track these over a longer period, 5 years, will it then be held against us if we don't manually pull these reports then beyond the 24-month period?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of your question.
Well, okay, I'm saying that with the goal here is for the LISC to track these clients for 5 years, right? Their FICO scores.
Mm-hmm.
And typically clients they stick around, they're basically active for the best possible is maybe 16 months, and then it tends to fade less and less after 18 months. With the goal that the LISC has of tracking these clients for over 5 years, tracking these reports for 5 years, how does that impact overall performance then?
Yeah, so we often see that, like to your point, that you'll work with a client for some period of time, then that engagement might fade for a bit, but then we'll see folks kind of boomeranging back around. So that's why we don't necessarily have a set, like, you need to exit a person after this amount of time or after this specific thing is completed. So kind of just keeping that case record open. You can obviously create your own policies for when to close it, but keeping it open will allow you to keep kind of pulling that. I think what we see is that can be a point of connection. So I can see on one end why we wouldn't necessarily have the system automatically populate credit reports, because what we want to do is to share those reports with clients. It's more about coaching than it is about having the information. And taking that information and sharing it with clients is really the most important thing here. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but if it doesn't get to the 5 years, it's not going to impact your outcomes.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay, I am going to go on to the next. Let me take a look at how much time I have. Oh, not very much. Okay. So I'm going to go on to, let's see.
Jackie, this is
Yes.
Claudia.
Yes.
You do have a little more time. This session goes for an hour and a half, so it's just a matter of leaving time for questions.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so just letting you know.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So then I'll just thank you for that. I can actually spend a little bit more time on some of the other financial things I wanted to touch on before I go to the employment. So looking at F35, number of people with at least one financial outcome. Again, this is touching back on the key financial outcomes I pointed out before. So credit scores, net income, net worth. What the chart is really showing here is basically what is needed to be inputted into the system in order for us to be able to see that outcome or output at the end of the day to count towards the financial outcomes. So I touched on this already, but we need F17 is important. So those subsequent credit reports are going to feed into seeing any improvements in credit scores. F19, which is subsequent budgets, is going to feed into showing us people who had a net income going up. And then F20, which is the subsequent balance sheets, is going to report back and let us know who has had an increase in net worth. This is the evaluation piece that I was referring to. Like, how can we use the FFT performance report to evaluate our programs? I'm going to walk through just one of these examples, but I will share after today's session the spreadsheet that this kind of came from. So there is a spreadsheet, if you haven't seen it already, that you can use. And what you do is you would just basically type in the number. Let's say we're looking at number 2 here. You would type in your outputs for F3 and F2, and then it will calculate for you, taking those two numbers, dividing them, and give you a sense of where, kind of where you fall as far as program implementation in a sense. So here, if we're looking at the total number of total number of people who had a direct counseling contact, and the total number who received a service, we want to see that everyone who has received a service is also meeting one-on-one with a coach. And so taking those two numbers together, we can see, are the majority of clients actually having that one-on-one contact with a coach, or are some of the services kind of being rendered outside of that one-on-one interaction? So essentially, are people kind of filling out the information for financials assessments without any follow-up with coaching that would kind of help drive their goals further? And this is more so on the evaluation piece, so I'll move forward. I'm going to dig into now the employment counseling outcomes. Again, I'll go to the chat and see if there's any votes on who, on which two. I'll focus on only two for this one. We'd like to dig in deeper on. Okay, so I don't see any for employment counseling. I wonder if it's pretty straightforward. Okay, I see one came in E12. Okay, great. So I'll take a look at E12 and E25. Okay. E12, number of people with a subsequent budget completed for an increase in earnings. Great, this is a great one. So we are here looking at how many people, we're looking at integration of the services here, basically. So whenever someone has a change in their employment, that can be either they got a new job, they were placed into a new job, they have a new advancement that would that led to them either having an increase in wages, or maybe an increase in hours. We are wanting to, I think that should really trigger for either you as the employment coach or passing that information on to a financial coach, that there is a change in the client's financial situation, and so that the budget needs to reflect that. So what this line is doing is that it's looking at when was the last time there was an increase in earnings, again, job placement, hourly wage increase, hourly hours per week increase. And then if there was a subsequent, if there was an assessment created in the system after that happened, that would reflect their new financial situation. So it's important to kind of keep an eye on the dates. In this case, we have the start date was the thing that triggered this, and that was January 9th of 2019. And then the subsequent assessment that occurred was on the 12th of January. The other one I see is E25. Oh, retention. So number of people who achieved at least one retention benchmark. So this is actually looking across E20 through E24 for the different retention milestones that we have: 30, 90, 180, 270, and 365. And as long as it's basically going to unduplicate the folks that fall within all of these. And so as long as someone reach one of the milestones, then they should be populating E25. So in order to kind of record that, in the system for it to populate in the performance report is that you would have to create an advancement record with a date that falls within the report period. So you see the date here. The status should be verified retention. And then there's a section specifically within advancements that says retention milestones. And there you'll want to select exactly which milestone was achieved. As far as recording retention, I will note that we track retention across across jobs. So what I mean by that is that you don't need to start at 0. If somebody was placed into a new job within 30 days of a previous job, we will still count. So if somebody ended a job, let's say January 30th of this year, but started a new job February 15th, that's within the 30-day time. And their last milestone was 90 days. The next milestone can then be 180 days. I hope I didn't confuse folks more by doing that explanation, but just to say that you can continue retention across. Yes, and so then similarly to the F lines, we have lines in that spreadsheet in which you can add, kind of plug in these numbers and evaluate your program and find kind of room for improvement or areas of success. Another one that I'll point out here, I think I'll skip to this one, is the one that I was referring to earlier in the call, which is the integration of services or bundling. If we take E8, people with an increase in earnings, and E12, people with a subsequent budget, it's letting us know the percentage of people who have actually completed a budget based off of their increase. And so when kind of E8 can serve as a case management tool to let you know like who's well, I guess both of them together can serve as a case management tool. You could figure out who still needs a subsequent budget when you compare who's listed in E8 and who's listed in E12 to see who might still be needing to be followed up for a budget, a subsequent budget. Okay. Were there any questions about the E lines, and is there any interest in digging into the I lines? I do also have wanted to try to fit in some time to look at custom reports, but if there's a preference to just look at more of the FFT performance report, I'm happy to be flexible with that. Anyone either way, which would be preferable? Okay, so we can jump into some of the I lines then. And I see I7 is noted here, so I'll dig into that one. So I-7 is looking at any a person who had a new or change in reoccurring benefit. So this is going to be looking specifically within the income supports counseling service entry. And within any of the benefits that are available, it's looking at statuses and a change in status. So if we see a status of approved or reapproved, or even receiving a benefit change in amount, and then any of the frequencies selected, then of course, within the report period, then this person would fall within this line. If you are adding if you are now aware of kind of the status of approval or a change in benefits, and then add a frequency of payments, it will, it's not an issue if the amount isn't there for this line, but it is important and helpful to have the amount of the subsidy here. And this can also be used to then kind of that integration between income supports and financial counseling. You should follow up with the financial coach, or client can, this can lead the client to another session with the financial coach to update their budget or their balance sheet. In this case, because it is a SNAP is a SNAP benefit, then this would automatically impact their monthly budget. And so it should be updating their budget for this. Okay, I am going to kind of quickly show what's available to you all as Salesforce users when it comes to custom reports. Our FFT performance report is probably the most comprehensive and useful tool. It allows you, it has lines in it that are too complex for the custom reports in Salesforce to put together, especially things like the like F2 and E2, which we touched on, that includes multiple services or multiple record types together, counting towards that service. But there still are a lot of things that you can do within custom reports that can help you even dig deeper into maybe specific funder related asks, such as maybe demographic asks for certain zip codes. Maybe you want to dig even deeper into employment data. And so this really allows you to kind of dig into the data more specifically for any of your funder needs, and or just out of curiosity to get a sense of like what's going on. So I'm going to take a second to stop sharing and move to Salesforce, actually. I'm hoping it doesn't kick me out. Okay. So when you sign into Salesforce, you will see at the very top there is our menu bar. And one of those tabs here is reports. Reports is going to take you to the custom reports section that I was referring to. And what you will see is that there are already a bunch of reports that have been created in the system for you. If we look at all within the tab, all folders, you'll see they're even organized into these different service areas. So we have reports that are specific to employment counseling, financial, income supports, our key outcomes across all the services, as well as some of the overall services. I recommend, if you're interested in kind of digging in deeper and exploring some of the data yourself, just getting kind of more client level information, that you start by looking at one of the reports that are already existing, and then you can build upon that or customize it to your specific curiosity or needs. So if I, for example, let me see if that's gonna. Oops. My apologies, 1 second. It's kicked me out. Okay, sorry about that. Here we go. Okay, so back to our reports tab. I like to start with the all folders just so I can see, personally, I like how it's broken down for me. And I'm gonna look in the employment counseling folder. I'm going to look at, so you can see there are many reports kind of created for you. Any one of these can be customized for your own purposes. I think there was a question that had come in about frequency of contact and how that can be calculated outside of the FFT performance report. You can find that. And so frequency of contact comes from the counseling topics or our service entries. It won't be exactly one-to-one, but this report will give you the closest to that answer or to that report line. You'll have to just select this and then manually calculate frequency for clients when you export the report. And I can show what those steps look like. Not the manual calculation, but at least the exporting of the report. But I'm going to do that with this report, people placed into jobs. So I'll click on this link. And for those that are familiar with the old Salesforce, older Salesforce user interface, this may look very different to you, but the functionalities are similar, if not exactly the same. At the top, you can make changes to what you're kind of seeing before having to actually fully go in and customize by clicking on this filters button. Here you can kind of see everything that is part of this report. So right now I can see that what's being pulled are employment records with a job start date between January 1, 2023 and December 2023. We don't have much data, it looks like, in the system for 2023. So I'm going to customize this to show different dates. So I can do that by clicking on here. Do 2019. So January 1st of 2019 through 2023, and then click on apply. And that will update my report to show my outcomes here. In this report, I can see that we have our case names, job start date, end dates, the type of employment, job title, let's see, hours worked. But something that is missing here that might be of interest would be the hourly wage. And so if I wanted to make sure that my report also shows hourly wage, I need to fully go in and edit to customize this report. So to do that, in the top corner, there's the edit button. And it's going to bring me into builder mode, basically. In builder mode, we still see the filters tab is still going to show us everything that's part of the filters. And I can add another filter here. So let's say I only wanted to look at job types that are permanent. I can click into this filter search box, type in job types. Job type. Click on job type. And I see it populates here now, and I'll have to just say, what is the value that I'm looking for? In this case, I want permanent. And click on apply. Just taking a second. Okay, there we go. So now that updated, so only showing the permanent. On the other end, I did mention, right, I wanted to add a field into here. So I'll have to click back to outline to look for what is a column, here we go, column, that I like to add into my table. This case, I was hoping to add something along hourly wage. Something that's really helpful is if you know kind of what you're wanting, it might be helpful to just have the report, the record type open, or maybe even just the paper version sheet, so you know the name of the field. That'll help with searching for things. I know the names of some fields, but not all of them. So I even sometimes have to refer to, oh, what is this field called? So I can know if I can pull it or how to pull it into the report. So here I want to add it as a column. I found the hourly wage. I'm going to click on it to add. And it was added to the very end here. You can see my hourly wages. Right now, what's happening is that it is adding it up. But let's say I mean, that's not really useful to add those up. It'd be more helpful to see them as an average across. So on every one of these columns, there is a drop down that will allow you to summarize in different ways. So right now it's selecting sum, but I think that an average would be more helpful in this case. And now you can see it's populated there. I could also group things if I wanted to. So let's say I wanted to group by industry. See my group. I'm going to group this row and type in industry. Oops, maybe if I spelled it right. Industry focus is the name of the field. So now I'm breaking this up so I can see the average hourly wage across each different industry type. And you can really play around with this as much as you like. There is no way to break the reports, just FYI. You will not you would not save over anything. What you can do is save as and create your own reports to refer back to. So here you see you can't click on save, so you're never gonna mess up an existing report, but you can click on save as and create a new report. Just make sure that you're adding those reports to, so I'm gonna select report, your organization's folder. So in this case, it's Breakthrough Urban, but you should see a report folder that has your organization's name. And so it'll be saved there for others in your organization to be able to use as well in the future. Then I'll go ahead and run this. And I'm also going to stop. Oh, actually, let me just show how to export and then I'll stop there. So I mentioned that there is a way to kind of export data if you needed to play around with it a little bit more in Excel or for whatever reasons. Next to the edit button, there's that drop down and you can click on export. And you can decide whether you would like that to be exported in the formatted version or with the details, and if it's in the type of Excel file that you would want to export it as. CSV would allow for you to download a larger quantity of data, but usually Excel, if you're working with smaller sets, should be just fine. Okay, and then with that, I will stop and see if there are any questions in the last part. It could be about the FFT performance report or custom reports, and I'm happy to kind of answer either those that come through the chat or anyone that wants to unmute themselves.
Hello, this is Kanisha. I just wanted to confirm, you said the FFT report will be fixed possibly by the end of this month?
We are anticipating that it should be available by next week.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it was one thing I just wanted to make sure in this one before we, you know, as the report has its moments, for financial and underemployment, F1 and E1 wasn't available. Is that just a glitch from the system, or will we still have those numbers available?
We removed it. I think it was because the
Okay.
report was going so slow. We had removed it. But I do, let me confirm. I do believe that it's back. The one
Okay.
line that is not coming back immediately, I think, is 05, which is folks receiving a service for the first time across any of the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Jacqueline. This is Adalberto from JBS Boston. And for the last 2 weeks, the FFT performance report is not coming up.
Yeah.
I just want to double check. When do you think that that glitch is going to resolve?
Yeah, that's what we were speaking on.
Okay,
So
yeah.
we're, you know, fingers crossed, but because this has been an issue for months now, but we
Yeah.
got into a point where we are expecting that the full performance report, not just the modified one, will be back by next week.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have one, Jackie.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is Dave Workowski from HRA in New Britain, Connecticut. My question is, at the beginning of your presentation, you showed a slide that indicated that the overall participation in financial coaching or financial education was about 23.7 thousand. Employment was 19.9 thousand, but yet income supports only registered about 13,000. Our experience here is that more than a commonality or an intersection between employment and financial coaching in terms of the ready participation of our clients is the intersection of income supports with the other two. And that's usually because folks that are coming to get assistance with developing themselves in either area, financial or employment, generally are being led by the fact that they also need some income supports. So I was curious about that statistic because I was wondering if could it be that income supports typically are residing with agencies that are outside the FOC model and therefore not always necessarily captured in the FOC reports? Or is it that perhaps somehow we're failing to capture income supports that clients already are getting perhaps with the help of the larger agency, but through other agencies that they may have to access for that. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, what I had shared was outcomes across our full network. So we have FOCs all over the place with varying, you know, each state kind of has their own policies when it comes to public benefits. And I think the main thing is that there's these huge differences where it might be actually like places like Florida, a lot more difficult to gain access to public benefits, be approved for public benefits than other states. There's also what I've heard over the years in especially southern states, a huge stigma. So clients maybe, you know, they're being provided or they're being told about the services, but they are not necessarily seeking or wanting to go down that path. And so kind of having to figure out how to better promote the benefits of, you know, it's not a long-term thing. It's kind of a short term to get you back on your feet to get you to a stable position, but trying to figure out how to get around the stigma that's connected to public benefits is another. And then I think to one of the points that you noted, just maybe not being fully connected to some of the systems in order to totally get the information that you need to put into our system when somebody is approved. So that follow-up, either figuring out the follow-up with clients or figuring out some type of follow-up system with a specific agency to know when somebody is approved for that benefit or if there's a change in their benefit. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
It did, thank you.
Hi, I have a question about the custom reports. This is Kanisha as well. Different Kanisha.
Okay.
So with the filters for like where it's like enrollment date or the customization for it, like the admit date or the apply date or the created date, they all kind of sound the same to me.
Yeah.
Is there a place here where I could like find the definition to know which?
Yeah, so the best way that I can explain kind of how to know the difference is so
It's under filters.
yes. Well, here this one's obvious, right? Like job start dates coming from the employment record.
Yeah.
But let's say you were looking at like what's another assessment date? Assessment date is a common one that we have across multiple. Let me see, assessment. Might not be in this one. But it kind of shows my example here. So assessment date might come up when you're searching it in a different custom report under multiple sections. And what you'll see is these bold ones tells you what part it's coming from. So whether the assessment date is coming from the case record, whether that's the client. This is not a good example. Let me go to a different report. Financial. I believe this looks. Okay, assessment dates. So typically, if you see a report period on these, it's specific to the assessments that's being pulled. In this case, this is multiple assessments. Again, let me try searching here. Assessment. Okay, so you can see that there's assessment dates across multiple types. And so it's either coming from here, we can see that the assessment date would come from the case record, or it's coming from an assessment. And this would be any type of assessment. So you could use it in the same way if you were just looking at budgets or if you were just looking at balance sheets. What's not pulling up here is the service entries, I think, are start dates. So I guess it goes back to what I was referring to, or what I was mentioning before. To know the exact name of the fields, it's helpful to either have the paper form up or actually have the record up in Salesforce. So
Well, it's not really the columns that I was talking about. It's underneath filters, you know, when you're putting in the date, when it's going underneath enrollment or whatever. Yeah. Or whenever you're pulling the time frame for the report, there's something. Yeah. If you do the drop down for where it says assessment date, there's like admin date, apply date, last modified, things like that. Like, I understand like the last service date would be when it was something, is like whenever we put a service into that case record, but enrollment or admin or apply or created date all sound kind of the same to me.
Mhm.
That's what I'm saying. What's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, so this, you can see it comes from the case record and you can see where it's coming from. So there's data, I mean, there's dates that you're not entering in, like an FOC PCO date you wouldn't have information for. There is no reference other than you going to the case record and seeing what are the dates that are connected to. We already have them set for like certain ones. I wouldn't click on admit date. We don't know that there's any data for that. Or you know, let's see.
To piggyback off that, this is the other Kanisha. What about like the last modified or the last service date? Like, is those two different ones as well?
I don't know what last service date is. I don't touch these. So
Okay.
Last modified date would be literally what's the last time somebody edited that record. And so it's not usually very helpful unless you are.
It's definitely different because the information changes if you switch that.
No, significantly. And so if you're trying to find out like what's happened within a report period, this is only telling you what was edited within that time period instead of telling you like what happened. The assessment dates are meant to tell you, like, you're entering an assessment date for the time, the date that it happened. And so that's why backdating is okay. If you use modified, it's going to be totally off. That probably wasn't helpful at all, but let me go to a case record to show where all these dates are coming from. Okay, so you can typically, so you see that there's dates kind of all along the way. They're not all being used. So keeping that in mind. At the bottom, we have our, I don't know where the service date comes from. I'll tell you that I don't know where that is. But our last modified date here, and this can actually sometimes be modified by Salesforce. So if they had a whole system-wide thing that was changed, then it would be reflected here. And so that's why the modified is not often very helpful. As well as created, I would say a lot of the information that's being put in, it doesn't get put in the day that it happened. So if you're adding a new client, let's say October 5th, but really they were enrolled, well, in this case, it's the same, but if they were enrolled sometime prior, then the dates are going to be totally off there. We typically would stay within assessment dates, service dates, and job start dates. If you have a report, and I'm sorry that I couldn't be more helpful with that, but if you have a report that you're playing around with and you have a specific question about like which date you should use, you can always reach out to the FFT our FFT support desk. And we're happy to help you figure out which is the right date.
Thank you.
I'll write the email right in here, FFT FOC support. And in these last 4 minutes, I can definitely wait for questions, but I wanted to do a little plug for our upcoming financial coaching training, which is actually going to be occurring being held in Providence, Rhode Island. Thank you so much, Claudia and the whole Providence crew, for hosting us. Those